Start here. We're starting chapter 4 now. Is everybody ready? Finally, we're moving slow, but we're moving good. Because it's all about reprogramming, right? Everything is about retraining our minds, how to think, how to view reality, how to think different, and mostly to have emunah and trust. We're going to see that emunah, trust, in general, emunah is the body of the laws of believing in God, knowing everything is perfectly orchestrated. It's for our best. It's to bring us closer to Him. The three main points of emunah. That's the idea, the concept that's in the mind, but then to move it into effect, to actually express it, that is what we call bitachon, or trust. There's faith and then there's trust. Faith is the concept, and then trust is the implementation of those concepts, okay? So we're going to learn that there's a two-sided coin to this, which really now I've waited till chapter 4 to get to the bomb. We've so far investigated, just to get a little recap, that in the first chapter, we understood that our thoughts create these forces that only bring us to the fruition of whatever it is the nature is. Every thought is creating an angel and it depends upon the level of energy. And then chapter 2, we moved into the importance of those thoughts, that a person really has to understand that he could have self-limiting thoughts. Most of us do. It's because of the Garden of Eden and the situation there. And then there is chapter 3, which talks about perception, because how we see things in the world is going to trigger us to react either to old patterns or to understand that our powers of perception are very powerful. How we see things is going to determine our thoughts, our attitudes, and then to change those is now what we're up to right now. So now we're talking about chapter 4, and I called it expanding our measure, because now we're really getting into the meat and potatoes here. Everything was about the setup of how powerful our thoughts are. Our perceptions are very powerful. But now we're going to go the next level, okay? Because we have to now actually start the reprogramming. So I called it, the subcategory is called utilizing cause and effect. Cause and effect is like a slippery slope here, because in the highest realities, in the bottom line, cause and effect, it was something that God created, okay, in order to develop a relationship with Him, a relationship with ourselves, and a relationship with Him. But really, everything really in the bottom line is all God's will. Every single thing, and that our consciousness is trying to get to having that so integrated in our mind and hearts that we understand that there really is no cause and effect. But we'll get to that. First, let's play with God, cause and effect that Hashem has set up in the world. And the big line is that we say Hashem is Hashem Tzilcha. Hashem Tzilcha from Tehillim is God is your shadow. Now, what does that mean? God is your shadow. Now, we understand shadows. Shadow is always going to move in sync with however you're moving. Now, God, I guess, is the grand shadow based on our mood. So let's explore this, okay? And the line that we have here is everything that Hashem does is measure for measure. Everything is midah keneged midah. That's the Hebrew for it. Midah keneged midah. Some people call it tit for tat, karma. What goes around comes around. You reap what you sow. You make your bed, you sleep in it, yada, 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 yada. We can do this for people all over the planet all the time. The Torah calls it measure for measure. And the interesting thing is that when we think about what midot are, what is a midah? Now, most people will classically translate that as a character trait. In the Rambam, in the Sefer Mitzvahs, midot, in his Yad Chazaka, he brings down the whole idea of the concept that he calls it midot, right? And everything that he talks about is character traits. Now, it's interesting when you think about it. Why should we call a character trait a midah? It's interesting when you think about it. The midah means measure. Like, how, say, so the way that I understand it, and if you got a better understanding, I'm open. How much love, how much gevura, restraint, how much is always in our going on in our psyche, our minds, based on either old patterns or we're developing new patterns. How much do I employ or utilize or express this quality versus that quality and that quality, all of it based on patterns. But the bottom line is that how we behave with others is how Hashem is going to behave with us. That's measure for measure. So let's explore that here a little bit, okay? So the God is your shadow, as we say. I'm in the middle of that paragraph where that's quoted, God is your shadow. The Baal Shem Tov explained this rule from the verse, and this is an amazing, why that verse? Ve'ahavta l'oreacha kamocha ani Hashem, which means you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am God. Right? Everybody knows this, the Klal Gadol b'Torah. This is the big, huge principle of the Torah. Hillel teaches on one foot, what that you hate, don't do to others, which is ve'ahavta l'oreacha kamocha. But everybody's stuck on this word kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. The phrase could have just said, love your neighbor. I'm Hashem. So let's listen to how the Baal Shem Tov does something very clever. I had a mentor in my yeshiva who also always used this rule. He says, move the punctuation so that it reads, love your neighbor. As you are, I am God. Look at how it's, in other words, love. You got to love, baby. You got to love, love, love. Because why? As you are, I am Hashem. In other words, that measure of how you love your neighbor, I'm going to be your shadow, right? The direct understanding is, okay, God is your shadow. Just as your shadow moves with you, so does God. As an individual behaves with his fellow man, such as with compassion and love, so too heaven will behave that way with the individual. Okay, so that would go in a way of actions. You have to be looking out for your neighbor. There's so much to go into this. This is just like even a small tip of the iceberg, this whole rule of how do we explore loving your neighbor. But just understand this little moving the comma affects the whole understanding, a different understanding. So in other words, it's no longer kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself. It's love your neighbor, period. As you are, I am Hashem. In other words, Hashem is your shadow. So the idea obviously is there's no limits. And the Baal Shem Tov would always go, really, this is a great line. The greatest thing you can do in the world is do someone a favor. Not like how Don Corleone does it, do me a favor. But when you, and the Baal Shem Tov says you got to really look out for your fellow man and go out of your way for him. And he would always do that. As we know, every Saturday night, he would go on a mystery tour with his students to do some kindness to some soul in a distant place. He was always working on the other. But now let's just go back, okay, into now where this really takes us now in terms of our exploration into our thoughts. So here's the source of the Talmud. I'm going to kind of paraphrase this great story because it is an absolutely incredible passage that it brings down in Kings. Actually, it explains where's me to connect me. Where is the source for measure? The Talmud asks in Sanhedrin. And it brings this whole idea of Elisha. What happened was the people were totally into idolatry. And when the people at the time in Kings or into idolatry, Hashem sends enemies to try to wake them up to straighten their ways out. He does that all the time. And so what happened was there was an army that came and he besieged the city where the king was. I forget which king. I wanted to look it up, but I'm not in a place where I have my books here. Maybe Achav. It could have been Achav. So they're besieged in a city. They're surrounded. No, you can't bring any supplies in. There's no emergency supplies. There's no, see, it's a lockdown, and people are starving in the city. And these two women made a deal because the kids are crying. Everybody's starving. And these two women make a deal, and she says, "Why don't we kill your baby?" It's terrible that we should be even speaking or thinking to such places, but it's recorded in the Tanakh. We'll kill your baby and eat it today, and then Wednesday, a few days later, we'll kill my baby and eat it, and we'll share. And what happened is one woman did it, and they ate, and then Wednesday came around, and the other woman didn't give up her baby, so she takes her to court. Going to court. I mean, they go before the king, and she says, "What? We ate my baby on Monday, and now we're supposed to eat her baby on Wednesday," right? And she's not giving up her baby. That's when the king says, "Enough of this. We've gone." And he calls the prophet. I don't know where the prophet was. He calls the prophet Elisha, and Elisha's not too happy about him. They bring music, and he gets into this prophetic state, and he finally comes and he says, "Tomorrow wheat will be sold in the market for $1 a pound." Now there's one guy, the chief of the army, and he says, "What? There's windows in heaven. Hashem's going to pour down that much food for people that it's going to be that cheap? No way." So then what Elisha responded, he says, "You're going to see it, but you're not going to eat it." And lo and behold, this is what the events occurred. There were two lepers who were sitting outside the gate because they're not allowed to be in the gate because they're tuma, they have tsaras, and they're starving, and they're going, "What are we going to do? They're not letting us in the city. Not that there's food there anyways. There's no food. Let's give ourselves up to the enemy army. We'll give ourselves up. If they kill us, they kill us. We're going to die anyways. And we'll be prisoners, and they'll give us some food." So they decide to give themselves up to the enemy army that's laying siege of the city. And they make it to the city, and they see it's completely deserted. But not only it's deserted, it's like the steaks are still on the grill, right? The cigarettes are still in the cigars are still in the ashtray. The Coke can is open. And it's like as if they left in a hurry. I don't know how they ended up finding out. But what had happened was that God made a miracle. And all of a sudden, here's this enemy camp surrounding the city, and they started to hear noises, big noises, and they started to hear like horses coming, the ground rumbling, and they thought, and the chauffeurs blowing, and noises were coming, and they thought there was an army that is coming to help the Jews, a big Egyptian army, and they all just fled in panic. In other words, listen, I had this note here. Here, I'm on the page for anybody who wants to know. We're on page 69. It's an amazing little line here. Maybe I should put it in the book itself. It's so powerful in terms of our emunah. So I wrote here, that's right. God can get into the minds of anyone and lead them to believe anything. Because Hashem really puts it into the mind. He puts our thoughts in our heads. If you want to know where thoughts come from, really they come from God. We can reach to try to create, and we're supposed to, the highest level of thinking, but you have to be open to it and willing to it, and you can't deject a thought. So the biggest source of that is that later on in Devarim, there's this phrase where Hashem says that we discuss later, one of the most poisonous thoughts that a person can think, the poisonous angels that a person can create, is never say, and it says never say, "My strength and might got me my success." In other words, my talents, my abilities, it got me all the success I have. The success I have is mine, and I got it because of my talents and abilities. God says never say that, because it's Hashem who gave you your success. And the Aramaic translation is an amazing translation because it says literally there, Hashem put into your mind that idea for you to follow, that business idea. Hashem put it in. He put it in your mind and you followed it and it became successful. Who put the thought in your mind? It was God who put the thought in your mind. He puts thoughts in the minds of everybody. And if you have that kind of emunah, that you're knowing, and my son even came out with this, we're walking in Hashem, we're walking in the Shekhinah. It's always going to be reflecting back to us different ideas and concepts and thoughts. And so it's really every single thing is saturated because God is all there is. And so God puts into our minds and our hearts really what to think. It's kind of like, well, wait a minute, where does free will come in? We'll discuss that. But in any case, the idea here is if a person is being stopped by a police officer or he's in a government office trying to get some forms or post off, and the person, whatever it is, if they're giving you a hard time, don't get mad at the stick. This is Hashem working something for you, in always in your favor. It's always, no matter what, you just let the police officer do what he's going to do. Give you a ticket, give you a warning. It's going to happen. God is really, believe it or not, putting into the officer's mind what's going to be. Okay? It's a high level of emunah, but it's the real level of emunah. So in any case, what happened was these lepers get to the city and they see there's all these provisions. The enemy army has fled. And they go, well, this food is just too abundant for us. We got to go tell the people starving in the city. They went back, told the people, everybody, whatever, who came out. I know people came out to schlep the stuff back into the gates of the city to sell all the wheat, flour, and provisions. And all of a sudden, here it is. Lo and behold, wheat is a bushel of wheat for $1 a pound. Amazing. Okay, or whatever it is. Okay, $1 a pound. Okay, they didn't have dollars in those days. In any case, what happened was this guy of the army who doubted Elisha, the chief of the army, he says, I got to see this. So he went to go see it and he saw it, right? But because there was a trample, he got trampled because everybody's so starving. So they trampled on him and killed him, right? That and the Rolling Stones concert, right? Which was, who was the Hells Angels? Were the bodyguards or security? I remember once it was a free Rolling Stones concert. And they got the Hells Angels to be the security, and there was trampling, and people also got hurt, or I think passed away. I don't know. I'm not sure. I remember hearing it as a kid. And the moral of the story is, don't go to a free Rolling Stones concert. Okay, get your seats. Okay. So in any case, we see from this source here. I'm on page 70. So we see from this source that the measure for measure principle includes thoughts and beliefs as well. This is an amazing thing. My dad always has this phrase, and it's an important phrase. If you don't believe you can have it all, then you get to choose how much less than all you will have. If you don't believe the sky is the limit, or I'm connected to the infinite source and infinite things can be done through me, and God works miracles and he's beyond nature and there is no nature. If you don't believe incredible things, right? Then your mind is going to limit what God can do. Okay? So consider for a moment the notion of our beliefs and how they create our reality. It's amazing. It's like we talked about before, when a person says hard, too hard, impossible, I can't. So every time he thinks that and he resonates in it and he thinks it with an energy, he's creating a wall in front of him that he cannot breach. And meanwhile, where did the wall come from? His own attitude, his own limited style thinking. So consider for a moment the notion of our beliefs and how they create our reality. How much does our limited style of thinking affect our experiences in life? It's so deep. We must realize that God is our shadow. If we don't believe that we can have it all, then I have it right here. We get to choose how much less than all we can have. I got two great examples of this. Okay, here's one amazing thing. Okay, here's the little caption in the gray. You got to just, for a moment, you got to just work on creating an angel, even if it's just for a second or 2 seconds or 3. You have to really integrate the idea and the energy that there is nothing God cannot do by means of me. And as a klal, as a community, there's nothing God cannot do by means of us. And if you don't believe that, so then you believe something else, and then you get whatever it is, that belief. Okay, before I get into the incident of the spies, there is the incident of the spies in general. Listen to this. That when they came to Moses and they wanted to send spies, before they never would have sent spies. There's a midrash which says that. I saw it in the Shemi Shmuel, Sukkotcheva Rebbe, that if they didn't send spies, they would never need a weapon of war to conquer Israel. In other words, if they went up to the border of Israel, Kadesh, I think they were in Kadesh, and they went just straight in, without the whole idea of, Moses, we want to send spies, we want to know where to go, right? If they would never have sent in spies, they would have been able to go into Israel, and I don't know what would happen with the enemies. They would run, they'd take boats over to, they disappear, they get sick, they die. I don't know, but the rule would have been no weapon of war. Once they approached Moses with their idea of, we gotta send spies, right? With the cigar, okay? Once they came with that idea of, we gotta send spies, we gotta see where to attack, how to go, instantly Hashem is your shadow. Okay, to go the send spies route, limited, so now the whole plan is different. Now the plan is going to be that we're going to need to fight. You didn't need to fight because I was with you. But once you approach the situation with a limited style belief, Hashem is your shadow. Okay, we'll go. Limited style belief. It's like the universe always says yes. Okay, it doesn't know how to say no. Well, it does know how to say no. We're going to see that because sometimes there's a higher agenda. So that's one incident where the limited beliefs changed the whole program because we approached it with a limited context. Moses also, when the people wanted meat, and then what happened was God says, okay, I'm going to bring meat for them, not only for just 1 day, 2 day, 3 day week. I'm going to bring them for 30 days. And Moses goes, are you going to bring 30 days worth of meat to these people, right? Where are you going to get that from? And what? Hashem says, what? My hand is short. Who are you talking to here? Right? Yeah, that's right. Moses talks in a Brooklyn accent because he understands in heaven, that's all they talk. So Moses also came with God with this limiting belief that it's got to, how are you going to get? You have to allow the infinite to be infinite and don't try to mesh the rhyme. But here we go. Here's an amazing incident that gives a great insight really into also really what we believe in ourselves and how we believe ourselves. As we know, that is one of the 6 strands in this rope of Emunah that I always talk about. So the well-known incident of the spies found in Sefer Bamidbar relates the situation of 12 spies going to the land of Israel before the conquest. All but 2 came back with a bad report. In their evil report of the land of Israel, they exclaimed this, and the people were giants. The people there were giants, and we were grasshoppers in our eyes, in our own eyes. So we were in their eyes. That was the language of the text. We were grasshoppers. We felt like grasshoppers. And yes, we had the experience where people actually looked at us like grasshoppers, right? Taking note of the double language, we were grasshoppers. We were in our eyes like grasshoppers. And so we were in their eyes. So the commentaries explain the degree of self-value of the spies. The commentaries explain that, which gave rise to their experience. The Gemara relates that the spies related an actual incident whereby they were spotted in a garden by the giants in the land, right? I always say, look, mommy, there are ants in our garden that look like people, right? Oh, no. What are we talking in a British accent for? The British don't even exist for thousands of years, but whatever. Look, there are ants in our garden that look like people. Their sense of self, I wanted to highlight this. Their sense of self-inadequacy in themselves gave rise to their actual external experience. As you believe we are self to be, then you will actually create that experience, or the universe will echo back to you. Hashem is your shadow based on what you believe you are, what you think you are. Right? They thought we feel like grasshoppers, right? And therefore they got this whole experience of a giant pointing the finger, you're grasshoppers. And they went and told back to the people. But in this one line, there's this whole dynamic of what it is that you think about yourself. And we know all this before because we learned in the previous chapters that really our essence is our neshama. That's really who we really are. And our bodies are just garments. So we have to shift, retrain ourselves, whatever the challenges might be, to try to start to practice viewing ourselves as being carved from the infinite. We come from the throne of glory, actually through Atzilus, in the throne of glory, which is Olam HaBriya, Olam Atzilus, Olam HaBriya. And then really our souls come from a very high place. We come from a place higher than the angels. We are the only ones who could come down to this earth and deal with stuff. Okay, and there is a lot of stuff. The angels couldn't handle it. They go down there, so they had to get the commandos. They had to get the high levels of soul from the throne of glory, TOG. Like we say, where do you come from? I come from the throne of glory. No more I come from Texas. No more I come from Israel. No more I come from Cincinnati. Where do you come from? Throne of glory. Okay, so anyways, there are many more texts and concepts that bring out this concept. The verse from Tehillim, God is your shadow, also expresses the concept that everything God does is measure for measure. So he makes this playing field for us. And it has to do with what we believe about ourselves, what we believe Hashem can do. And we have to work on retraining our mind to expand our measure. Here, just another bit of this reflection. I'm not sure why I put this here, but I know a person who was very upset with us. He was very quiet with us and very cold with us, and we couldn't find out why. Until finally we asked him, what is it about? Well, did we do something? And he says, yeah, because you guys, when this person died, you put on the post, and you gave him credit for something, and I also deserve credit, and you overlooked me, right? And the person felt overlooked. And I'm going, wow, that's so sad. Here we were eulogizing that somebody who passed away, and we gave him credit for something, and then we missed this person in their language. Okay. So I thought about it, and it was an interesting concept, because here this person is having the experience in the outside realm of being overlooked. We had no intention of overlooking this person and not giving them the credit that they deserve. But this person was greatly agitated, and they expressed it to us. We realized only later, noting all his life, it should be life there, typo, all his life experiences, that he had an agenda constantly. His pattern of believing himself was being overlooked. So if he thinks that, and the big one is also, which I've had, and maybe you can share it also, I know, some people feel they're being taken advantage of. Has that never happened to any of you? Okay, happens I get it every now and then. I feel like this person is taking advantage of me. What do I do? And so I spoke to a very wise man, my father. He's amazing. 90 years old, clear mind, clear heart. So he says, when you're confronted with that disturbance, and it could be any disturbance, any. But if I'm confronted with, I feel like this person is taking advantage of me, that's God sending you a reminder that you're not connected to God. I need more of a connection to God, because the way I'm seeing this now is affecting me and affecting my feelings, and it's taking me over, and it's occupying my mind a little bit too much. So it only serves as a reminder that you need a greater connection to God. That there's different ways to view it, different ways to see it. But the idea here is, as those situations being overlooked or taken advantage of, they occur to you, it's only God sending you a reminder. Hey, buddy boy, get connected to me. Okay, so that's how I saw this person, and also about us and our personal belief system. Do we believe we can be victimized? That's a big one. That's a really big one, because it's very rampant in the world, and a lot of people use it. They want to claim the victim, that they're the victim. And you know who introduced that into the world, that idea, that concept? Abel, my father-in-law. He once exclaimed, what was Abel's problem? Why heaven decreed that he should die? Because no one gets hurt in this world unless heaven says, okay. That's a big rule of Amunah. As hard as it is, and our heart goes out to everybody and all of the suffering, and there's so much suffering in the world, and we don't understand it, and we'll get to it. Still, we have to understand that there's an agenda. So the idea here is that this person had an agenda of being overlooked, and that's why internally they felt that they could be victimized. Abel was victimized. He introduced the concept of victimization because he got killed by his brother, and therefore introduced the concept of somebody can be victimized. Okay? And therefore get into people's minds. And then when you have a victim mentality inside, you feel you can be a victim, then you're going to create situations, your mind, you're going to create these angels, which are going to create a circumstance and an experience where you feel victimized. Or maybe you're not, the person didn't have any intention of discounting you, but you feel it. And it's real, okay? But the idea is, where did this come from? So I wrote here in the caption, and this is a very dynamic line, the world treats you the way you treat you. Again, the world treats you the way you treat, or let's say, to put it in the form of creating an angel, the world treats me the way I treat me. So how do I treat myself? Do I look at myself as a dynamic soul that has unlimited capabilities? Or do I look myself as a body stuck? Now, don't forget, okay, let's go on. We are taught that there are two forms. Now, here we go. I'm dropping the bomb right now, okay? I waited all the way until page 71 to drop this bomb, that really bottom line about this whole idea of manifesting, right? It only goes so far. I was at the airport, by the way, just to let y'all know. When I was taking off from Ben Gurion 2 weeks ago, when I was taking off from Ben Gurion, I was in the airport when the missile came from the Houthis, and it hit next to the airport. I was in the airport, and all of a sudden, security comes and rushes us to some kind of tunnel section in the terminal before going through security, and we heard the big boom, and the whole building shook, and we knew what it was. And we're waiting, and finally they let us get up to the security place to go through the security. And we're waiting and waiting at least a half an hour, maybe more. And we don't know if the flights are canceled or not. But I'm waiting in the line there. And I'm listen to this. This is so cool. And these two women are talking behind me and like, is the flight going to be canceled? Are we going to get on the flight? It'll be delayed for sure. Let's manifest now. Getting on the flight. Yeah, I'm working on my manifesting right now, right? And, I didn't have a copy of the book to hand them. And even if I did, I wouldn't give it to them because it's $20 a copy. I'm not going to just, okay. But anyways, the idea here, it is the talk of the town, okay? People are involved in this and it plays an important role. But you have to understand there is a creator and he runs creation. And here we're going to get into. Okay, this comes from the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, and Das Tivunos. The principle of measure for measure is not infallible. We are taught that there are two forms of how God manifests his divine providence. I translated them. The guiding force of balance, it's called Hanhagas HaMishpat. Really, it would mean Hanhagas, guiding force of Mishpat. Mishpat is kind of like justice. That's one. And then there's the guiding force of oneness, or Hanhagas HaYichud. Hanhagas HaYichud is, I called it the guiding force of oneness. The word Yichud has a lot of translations. Okay, Yichud is, the Kabbalists will use that as a meditation for joining names, putting together names of God in meditation, Yud-Ke Vav-Ke with Adonut or Elohim, and there's different permutations of God, and they call it Yichudim. And then there's your soul, your neshama, your highest level of your soul is called Yechidah. In Yechidah, which means kind of like uniqueness. Like a person is finally at the level of soul where his uniqueness is expressed. His unique mission is known, his unique mission is expressed. So yeah, Yichud means joining, like, it's hard to find the right word for it. So I used guiding force of oneness, as we're going to see. So the guiding force of balance is measure for measure, as we've been talking about. Tit for tat. As you believe, you're going to get what you believe, right? If you believe you can't have it all, you get to choose that much less. The guiding force of oneness is what I call special treatment, or what I would also call unknowable agenda. God has an agenda, right? So the guiding force of oneness always acts as an executive override. No matter what we do or what we think, there are some decrees that cannot be changed. The biggest example of this is Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu made 414 prayers to get into the land of Israel. He was going to make one more prayer, and Hashem says, you cannot pray anymore, because if you do, I'm going to have to let you in, and it's just bad for the general plan. And the general plan was that God knew that the people were going to become spoiled in the land of Israel, and were going to become rich, affluent, bunch of spoiled brats. Kind of like what this generation today, they don't want to work. They think it's entitlement, whatever it was. They did sins. He knew that they were going to sin. And he knew that there was only two options. There was either total annihilation, because they would sinned to such a degree, or they have to go into exile. If Moses was going to come into the land, then he would have set up the land in a spiritual sense, somehow a mentality, that the land would never ever be able to be conquered by another nation. No matter what other nation would come, or they wouldn't fight, or whatever, the land would never ever be able to be conquered, even after Moses passed away. And if that would happen, Moses would get into the land and the land would never be able to be conquered. That means the option of exile would be off the table, and there'd be only one option left, You can ask, why can't Hashem make another option? That's because man thinks, doesn't think. That's because it's up to man's choice. It's like almost like a chess. Sarah, what was her name? Sarah Schneider, right? She told me this. She quoted from a Kaplan book. Hashem is like playing chess with us. We move, and he shadows that move, counters that move. Okay, based on our moves, he moves. Okay, so the interesting dynamic when you think about it, and that's really God's hashgacha. Really, God, Hashem ani Hashem lo shaniti. I don't change. But according to how we approach is going to be God's attitude with us. There are like 4 reasons why Moses was not able to come to the land. I think of 5. I heard 5, but I can't remember. One was that I was seeing in a Rashi when he complained to Hashem after the Jewish people were enslaved, and they had to make the bricks without straw, and their work got really hard, and they couldn't even talk to Moses, and he saw the work got harder on people. And he goes to God with a shtickle attitude of like, why'd you send me? Why'd you send me? Right? So so Hashem said to him, basically, now you're going to see what I'm going to do to Paro. And Rashi is exact there, that you're not going to see what I'm going to do to the 31 kings of Canaan. In other words, it was either a Hashem knew, it was already in the agenda, whether it was based on his emunah or his attitude, because Hashem did speak harshly with him. Now you're going to see what I'm going to do to Paro, not in Israel. So obviously it seems like it was the beginning, or maybe that was it. And then the other reasons was because that he was a child of a aunt marrying a nephew, and since Mount Sinai they got those laws that aunts cannot marry nephews anymore, and he was a son of that, so therefore that was one reason. Another reason was that when he was at the well and he saved Tzipporah, Yitro's daughters, from the hoodlums, the bullies, and Yisro's daughter was pointing to the man in the well going, Dad, that's the Egyptian man. Moses, in like probably a fraction of a milli, who knows what, led them to believe that he was an Egyptian for maybe even a fraction of a moment. There was a leading to believe that he was an Egyptian man until he says, I'm Jewish. In other words, he didn't come out fast enough to say, I'm a Jew. Okay. He led them to believe he was an Egyptian man, and therefore that belief on his level had an effect that he wasn't able to come into the land. And then there's the most obvious reasons why Moses was not able to come into the land was because he hit the rock, and he called the Jewish people rebels. I think we got 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay, 5 reasons. In any case, Moses finally prays 414 prayers. God, let me in, right? And Hashem says, you can't make another prayer because I can't let you in. No matter what Moses did, there's a higher agenda God has. And now how it works is, it's a great midrash in, I think it's Miketz, in Midrash Tanhuma, that God has his agenda. And now how does he implement his agenda? He finds like something, a reason or something that people do, so he hooks his agenda on that thing. So Moses hitting the rock, I've got a hook to hide my agenda. Now you can't come into the land. Aaron can't come in either. And Aaron goes like, what did I do? Right? And sorry, you were with him. You're an accomplice. Okay. Right. Miriam, she couldn't come into the land either, even though all the women could go into the land. The decree to die in the desert did not apply to the women. They didn't sin in the golden calf. They weren't into all the mishigas that everybody was into. They got to go in, but Miriam also, because there was an agenda. Hashem has a higher, we don't know what it is. We do know, based on our beliefs, that it is the absolute highest agenda possible. It is for the highest reasons that we, in our limited thinking, cannot understand. And this is where trust and bitachon comes in. Okay. So here's the thing about the manifesting that there is a place for the no answer. It could be in God's higher agenda. No is no. I remember, and I knew it, as my son was in the Columbia Hospital in a coma, and he passed away. We didn't leave any stone unturned. We gave a donation to a special Kabbalah yeshiva in Israel, and they made a special prayers, and they were praying, and then they sent us word back, actually, that as we were praying, we felt that Baal Shem Tov was with us praying as well. They all said that. Wild, okay? But I knew that at a certain point, the answer was no, that this has to be it. We have to. No matter what you pray, no matter what you think, there are some decrees that cannot be changed. A person might think the loftiest, most positive, and happiest thoughts when they are sick, and yet they still might pass away. This higher agenda guarantees that there is an even higher reality to reach. There's higher things. Believe me, believe me, believe me. You know it's going to be true. That when everything is done, and the end of everything, when Hashem is done with the masterpiece picture, right? Portrait, painting, or whatever, creation, we're going to see in the end, and we're going to say, I could not have imagined it better. In my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined every single thing so perfect and better. We are going to say that. So you can think it. So a person shouldn't become stressed, I better think the highest thought is that God is running the show. That's the highest thought you can have. But you have to have it with a feeling. You have to be in the force, right? So just to go back on that line, okay, this higher agenda guarantees that there is even a higher reality to reach, a higher concept to grasp, a oneness to which the unlimited creative intelligence is bringing us. The bottom line is, you just have to trust your knowledge of the unlimited creative intelligence who is directing the universe to its highest experience. And we are just too limited to figure it out right now. That's why I say, but bitachon, trust in Hashem, is a two-sided coin. Emunah bitachon is a two-sided coin. One-sided, you have to have emunah. Think the highest thoughts. Don't think any limited style thinking, right? Totally knock off any kind of limited beliefs about yourself and the world and what God can do. You have to puncture the eye of the point of the needle. You have to make all of your efforts possible to think the highest thing. And on the other side of this coin is that Hashem, no matter what happens in the end, Hashem knows, and it's the right thing, and there's a higher agenda. Okay, on Hagas Mishpat, on one side of the coin, we are obligated to think the highest thoughts, dream the highest dream, be the highest we can. And on the other thought, if we're not successful, it's because God wanted it to be that way. So, just to give us a little bit of a record scratch, one of the editors gave me flack for this one, because I believe me, I wanted to type, you got to get out more, buddy boy. Okay. When my brother Alav Shalom passed away from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, my father exclaimed, "Who said a healing has to come in the form of a body healing?" Now, the word tikkun in Hebrew literally does mean rectification. It's your tikkun. Your role. It's your role. It's your tikkun. Whatever your role is. The people around you, with the situations in your life. That is your role. That is your tikkun. But I have also seen the word tikkun translated as healing. When you think about it, it much has a different context to it, connotation. A healing that can traverse a lifetime. A healing of soul. Our souls can go through several lifetimes. And the unlimited creative intelligence brings us situations in each of them. He brings us situation in each of them to bring us to a final completion. In other words, lifetimes. It takes lifetimes to cleanse out the crud and to become the ultimate vessel. In the end, the Creator will show us all of the situations in our lifetimes and reincarnations made, and then how it all made sense. However, because we are stuck in this limited plane, most of us are clueless. So, in the larger scheme of the process of the soul, it could be seen as a healing in a higher sense. In other words, if a person doesn't, even though they think the right thoughts and everything else, and they're not successful, it's because of the higher agenda, and it's because it's a healing of a different nature. We're used to seeing healing, it has to be this way, and we're limited. But really, there's a broader sense of soul healing that has to occur, i.e., the no answer from God. The Creator's agenda is to make us into vessels that will receive the infinite light. We've been talking about this for years. Once again, the Creator's agenda is to make us into vessels that will receive the infinite light. His purpose will be fulfilled. If we fully integrate that agenda into the deepest fibers of our being, if we truly understand what God is doing, and if we totally grasp His divine providence, we will feel very differently when adversity strikes. Right? As stated previously, it all comes down to trusting the Infinite One. For example, when a doctor performs a procedure, it's painful, right? The dentist, right? It's uncomfortable, right? But the patient, hopefully mature, he accepts it because he knows it's going to fix him and he'll become better. So here we go. And then we're going to end off with this. We can try to understand this with a parable. You're in a car with a driver, let's say a bus. I like the bus. And who's driving? God is driving. Right? How do you like my driving? Right? God goes, his eyebrows go up and down. He smiles. And you're in the bus, maybe jumping along here, right? Sometimes the trip is smooth and moves just as planned, or at least somewhat predictable. While sometimes your ride is completely off the wall and the driver appears to be going off a cliff or whatever, he makes a left turn into a dangerous neighborhood, right? Maybe he's driving in a bad neighborhood or the opposite direction, but we have to go that way, right? According to your feeble, limited comprehension, sometimes the driver will stop the car, stop the bus, go to the back of the bus, take off one of your family members, open up the door and throw them out, and then continue on. In other words, someone dies. Someone dies. And you're going, why? The person was such a good person, right? Sometimes maybe he'll let people on, right? He'll stop the bus in a bad neighborhood and a gang gets on, rip off your wallet and everything like that and leave them and get off the bus, right? And then he continues on, right? It could be very trying times, and they force you to choose to either trust the driver or argue with him. Most of the suffering that we do is where there's resistance, and we resist our tikkun. If we could strive, I don't know, I put it in the footnote here, I put it in the last footnote there. Yes, I'll talk about that in a second. Okay. So sometimes he will let someone, right? So if you trust in the driver, then you can relax and enjoy the ride. Maybe not so, maybe it could be alarming. There could be shocking scenes. There could be questioning things. You could be, that's interesting, right? Right? Once we fully integrate that God is running the world and there is a goal in mind, we can at least attempt to be a little more at ease. Okay? So I wanted to show this in note 7 on the previous page 72. When things happen that seem to be adverse, the highest response would be to accept all things with love. These are just tips of the iceberg topics, right? It is a true art to develop. Yes, it is. And all the righteous and knowing people constantly work on this, how they can accept little things or big things that happen with love. To accept them with love is the highest. Not all of us can do it, and not at all times. I practice it on my little level, that when I have the groceries in my hands, and it happens, I'm carrying the groceries and I put the other bag in this hand, I'm holding it while I reach into my right pocket for the keys to the door, and the keys are in the left pocket. So I have to shift over and reach into the left pocket. And I go, thank you, Hashem, because that is really the afflictions that we're really supposed to have. In other words, we're supposed to be really on that level where these little things that are annoying to some level, we should accept those and accept even more on a higher level with love. And that's where we're going to leave it off right now. Okay, so the idea here is this whole manifesting thing, it has a limit to it, because there's always God's agenda. It's a big thing, but we're still obligated to make every single possible effort we can to reach for the highest thought, emanate the highest angels, and reach to the highest goal. And that was what the Torah is directing us to do, that we'll get to in Yirtzeh Hashem, and we'll stop with that.
I have one question.
Sure.
I love this chapter. I particularly